Hi, my name is Kate. I'm a poet and a writer. For today's video, I want to talk about the fact that words have meaning and power. And if you let someone take away that meaning, they are also taking away the power that those words have and the power from you. So let's talk about it. And I want to talk about this specifically having to do with the term unalive. Like, nothing has bothered me quite so much as hearing unalive. And I recognize that like 1984 is not probably standard reading in high school anymore. Those of us who grew up already and did read 1984, I feel like maybe some of us might have missed the message. Some of us might have spark noted a little bit too much rather than reading and understanding what the problem is with taking a word like dead and turning it into unalive. The great universal thing that all people have in common, that all things on this planet have in common, is that we will all die. Someday we will be dead. And that is a sad thing, and that is a hard thing, and that's a thing that hurts. It's a thing that's really scary, but it's still a thing that is true and that happens to everyone. And so when you take a term like dead, which has that kind of a weight and that meaning, and turn it into something that is a happy term, which alive is happy. Everyone likes being alive, right? Being alive is a good thing. If you take that and just put an un in front of it, so it's a little bit happier, a little bit less heavy and sad and scary, you're doing a great disservice to the meaning of the word. Like, someone is not unalive. Someone has died and they are dead. Someone did not get unalived. They were killed or they were murdered. Especially when you talk about this in terms of like someone in the news, you hear someone got unalived by the war. It is so disrespectful to belittle the experience that this person has gone through, to belittle the event that happened by saying something like unalived when you mean that they were killed, that they were murdered. This is a really big problem, and I know where it stems from. This really started to be very noticeable heavily around the pandemic. I think TikTok really made its waves during the pandemic, but I think before that, where I really noticed it was on YouTube. And during the pandemic, YouTube creators very heavily noticed that, and I'm talking about like big name creators who have companies, who make their living off of YouTube and who have employees who they pay with their YouTube revenue. Big creators, ones who are actually bringing in cash off the platform. They would notice that if they said the word pandemic, even if they were talking about straight facts having to do with the pandemic, or even just like relaying messages about the pandemic, or even talking about their experience having to do with the pandemic, they found that their videos would get demonetized. And for these big creators, of course, they've got employees to pay, they've got mouths to feed, you know, this is their lifestyle. So being demonetized was a very big deal for them. So they found a workaround, which was a lot of them to choose to use a different word. And often that was panini. So instead of having a pandemic, they were like, okay, people will understand from context. If I say the panini, you all understand it's a pandemic. And it was like, ho, 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 that's so funny, but it works, it gets around the censors, okay? The problem then came where much smaller creators, people who were not making any money, who had very small platforms, or maybe bigger platforms, but they weren't making any kind of money, they weren't bringing in a lot of revenue, they weren't making their lifestyle out of YouTube, they weren't paying employees. They also started using it. And some of them, it was because they were like, hey, the pandemic is big and scary. Panini sounds cute. It sounds funny. It's very like Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, right? It sounds fun, and I don't have to engage with the fact that we are going through this major crisis. And then there were also creators who I genuinely believe thought, oh, this big creator says, I can't say this word anymore. YouTube is not letting me, so I also now can't say this word because I don't want to lose this platform that's very precious to me. I don't want YouTube to kick me off and ruin this thing that's very valuable to me. So I'm also going to not say it anymore. So instead of what was happening, which was a massive global pandemic in which many, many people died, many of them unnecessarily, because we were not prepared for this, and because especially countries such as the United States, where I live, where we had a very robust system for dealing with pandemics that had been very recently dismantled by the previous Trump administration. We were a country who had normally been kind of the forefront of stopping and heading off these kinds of pandemics, and we were not equipped any longer, due to that being destroyed, to cut that off, nip it in the bud, stop it from spreading greater. So it spread very quickly in our country. And then we were also spreading denial. We were really not helping. The US was doing the worst. But anyway, we were all experiencing this huge pandemic. And yet for some reason we were all talking about this giant panini we were all having, which was super fun and cutesy and quirky, right? And I think I want to speak a little bit to the second kind of creator, not the one who was like, oh, this made me feel uncomfortable, so using panini is fun and quirky. I want to talk to the ones who were, thinking that their channel they were going to lose their channel for saying pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and tell you about a personal experience. On my other channel, I review K-pop songs. I haven't for a little while. Since I got pregnant, I've kind of fallen away from it, but I was reviewing K-pop songs, reading the English translations and really talking about the meaning of the songs. And one of the songs was by a group called Tomorrow by Together. And they had this album come out, I think it was a Temptation album. And oh my gosh, the name of the actual song is slipping away from me right now. But the song I was reviewing, the whole album had this theme of like going to Neverland, basically. Like there's this Peter Pan theme going on. It's very druggy, it's very psychedelic, like for a group that their target audience is really like young girls. This was a wild album for me. This like blew my mind. But this specific song that I'm thinking of, and I will link it, I'll link the one if you want to see me kind of be like, what the heck is happening? In the song, the character of Peter Pan comes to the window as kind of a demonic spirit almost, and he date rape drugs the boys and drags them out the window to Neverland. And I was just like, what? Well, I was like reading the translated lyrics. I was like, is this seriously happening? Did he just date rape drug these guys? And one of the comments that I got back on that video was someone who said, you can't say that word on YouTube. And I was like, which word? And rape was the word that they were having an issue with. They're like, you can't say that, like as a warning to me, not as like a personal, like, oh my God, I feel, they were like, you can't say that, like your channel is gonna get demonetized kind of thing. And I was just like, my channel doesn't make any money. My videos already don't get ads on them. Like they're already not friendly for advertisers, a lot of them. And a lot of them then also, because it's copyrighted material, I don't make the money off of those videos. So it's like, you can say whatever words you want. Like it wasn't a problem that I used the word date rape to describe this song. That wasn't going to be a strike against my channel, but this person didn't understand that. And I thought that was just very interesting. I think this goes back to the kind of first time YouTube really had a major crackdown. The one I'm thinking of specifically is gun channels. YouTube really sent out a blanket the first time they decided they were going to crack down on content. Channels that promoted guns are great and we love shooting things. And then also ones who are just like, guns are very interesting, here's how they work, here's how they operate, or even ones that were just kind of like, oh, this is a really interesting piece of machinery. There's a wide range of channels, and some of them were just like, I like blowing things up in the backyard and apparently I have a ton of money to do it. All of these got kind of blanketed into this first big crackdown. And one of the major things that happened was they got a ton of videos demonetized all at once. And so these gun channels were panicking, obviously. Like a lot of them were now making like, they're living off of these videos that they had made, these gun videos. And suddenly like a lot of their videos were demonetized all at once. And that was very scary to them. And so they were like, oh, YouTube is saying I can't do this, can't do that. And the thing is, the language that they were using at the time was very much, YouTube is kicking me off the platform. YouTube is getting rid of me. YouTube is silencing me. They're censoring me. And that wasn't what was happening at the time. At the time, what was happening was they were getting demonetized. They were no longer getting ad revenue. Ads weren't playing on their channel. They weren't making money off of those videos. Now, that isn't the same as taking down their channel. It isn't the same as putting a strike against them on their channel. It isn't the same as censoring parts of their video, but they acted as though they were being censored, and they acted as though they were being attacked and their channels were being shut down, and caused this great amount of panic that really was just, and you know, people making a living off of things like that, that's their money, that's what they've been counting on, like that is a big deal. But like, people get fired from their jobs. People do stupid shit and they get fired from their jobs. People don't do stupid shit and get fired from their jobs. Like, people get fired all the time. Like, people lose the way that they make money all the time. And so why was it treated so differently when it was creative content and you posting your own videos online, your freelance gig? Why was that treated as though you were being censored when really you weren't getting paid anymore for the content you're putting out? You know, like, the sponsors weren't willing to pay for your commissions anymore, was basically what was actually happening. And so I just think that's really interesting that was happening. And that then kind of spiraled into this whole mindset where people were just like, oh, YouTube is like shutting down channels. There were very few channels that actually got shut down, and a lot of them, it was for pretty egregious, really creepy content. Like, I don't know if anyone remembers the like Spider-Man and Elsa stuff going on, and I will not elaborate on that, and I will not link to anything about that. If you don't know about it, you don't know about it. But it was aimed at children. It was pretty disturbing. It was being specifically targeted in such a way as to make things quite disturbing. And it's the reason that then there is like kids-friendly content and not kids-friendly content, and you have to kind of choose which one your videos are. So we have this history of kind of over-exaggerating what is happening and kind of conflating censorship with just losing a job opportunity, which is really what it was. And yet it created this catalyst for this censorship of language. That, oh, if we just do things slightly different, it passes through the censors and then it's okay. And in some things that's totally fine. But when it comes to things that are a lot bigger, like the pandemic, we were not experiencing a giant panini. No one was experiencing a giant panini. It was not Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. People were dying, especially now when we're talking about people being unalived. People are dying. They're dead. And that's something that should have weight, should carry an emotion with it. And unalive is such a flippant throwaway term that it's a bit infuriating. Like, language has so much power. And when you try and strip back that power, you lose the ability to think critically about things. That is the plot of 1984, is that one guy was really afraid that this was happening in his country, in the Soviet Union, and basically wrote a warning story about it. He was like, this is happening or could happen, and this is like the worst case. Like, what this story explains this scenario. Someone's not dead, don't worry. They just are unalived. And you think about that as, oh, it's the same thing. What does that matter? But alive, again, has a happy connotation, and throwing in front of it still allows you to keep that happy connotation when what happened is sad and hard and scary. And you should have to sit with sad and scary thoughts sometimes. Like, that's not a bad thing. I actually watched a video about someone talking about raising children. Since I'm raising a child now, I feel like it's really important to start learning about how to raise a child, right? And they were talking about the fact that a lot of times parents want to protect their children. And like, duh, obviously you want to protect your child, but they protect them too much. So you protect them sometimes from feeling emotions that they just need to feel. Like, sometimes something sad happens and a child just needs to feel sad about it, and you being like, oh no, it's not a big deal, like, you're actually really good at these other things, like throwing away the emotion, like redirecting away from the emotion, is so detrimental to a child. Like, sometimes you just have to sit and feel how much something hurts. Sometimes you just have to sit and be sad, and that's actually really healthy, and especially in a young brain, to learn how to process that kind of sadness and heaviness and emotion. Learning how to sit with that is really, really important for just overall maturity, for learning how to be a mature person. If you're not able to handle kind of basic emotions, if anything outside of happy and joyful really like redirects almost to anger because you can't handle it, that is a problem, and that is a problem with your mental development. If we're doing that to ourselves, if we're censoring ourselves and protecting ourselves and redirecting ourselves away from feeling with and engaging with important emotions, and sadness and fear and anger are all really, like, let's talk about inside out, right? Like, these are really important emotions to actually feel, to like go through. One of the most valuable things that people have told me about going through postpartum and going through a divorce and having to go through them at the same time is sometimes you gotta feel your feelings. And you need to feel your feelings a lot. Like if you need to go and cry, you gotta cry it out. And if you don't and that bottles up, it creates other issues. Maybe down the road, maybe right then, but you've gotta feel your feelings. If you're mad, you need to feel mad. Like I was told I should write an angry letter to my ex. Not something to send, something to like burn up, but write everything like as mad as I can be, because you need to feel that. You need to learn how to feel that. I feel like that's why so many people go to therapy, is because we're sort of taught not to feel a lot of emotions, or how to hide emotions or redirect away from emotions. And then you go to therapy and they're like, time to learn how to feel them. We just need to learn how to sit with them. And one of the first ways is to just sit with the words. The words have the meaning, and to just engage with the fact that we already have a word for pandemic. We don't need to hide that. We don't need to hide from the fact that many people died. And if your content talking about it is not viable for capitalism, is it still more valuable to you? And I'm gonna say, for most people, the answer turned out to be yes, which is unfortunate because it then created this problem. But is it more valuable to you than to fall in line with the system and undermine the importance and the meaning of the words? Or is it more important to just say the words and deal with the consequences of having to find a different way to make money for a living? And I do think those of you who spark noted 1984 or just read a summary off Wikipedia or didn't read it for class, I would challenge you to go ahead and sit down with that book. It looks pretty dry, but I would challenge you to sit down with it and engage with it and read that thing and think about it a little bit. Think about why an author who is living through another time of great upheaval would sit down and write a book like this. This sort of warning, this sort of dark, kind of twisted story about the way a government was operating. Why would they do that? And how did it affect this person? And what amount of torture did this character have to go through in order to conform? And I think you need to read the actual story. I think getting the spark notes of a story like this, you lose so much of the meaning. You lose the engagement with it. Knowing what happens in a story is not why we read stories. Like this has been a books and writing kind of channel, right? Like you're on the same page as me about this, I assume. We don't read a story just to see words on a page. We read a story to engage with a character, to learn something, to actively take the words and the meaning that the words carry with them and engage with that emotionally. I want to cry when I read a book. Like I want to be so into it that I am like slamming the book shut because I'm so nervous about what's going to happen next. Like I want to be like nails digging into the side because it's so cringe, but I just have to get through the cringe part. Like I want to have the little flutter in the stomach when the romantic bit is happening. I want so badly to cry and to feel that emotion in the safe space that is a book, and to deal with that kind of mental gymnastics, to have that be happening in a safe place of a book, so that when something that is sad happens in my real life, I know how to engage with it. I think that's so important. I think that's something that we are not emphasizing enough in the world today, that it should be emphasized more. Words have meaning, and there's so much power in that. And if you use words as they're supposed to be used, if you use them with the weight that they carry, you have a lot of power there. That's what I wanted to talk about today, is just defending language, defending words, not letting words be softened for the sake of softening them. Language is something that evolves over time, but we should not allow it to degenerate. When it changes, it should be to become bigger, to become more, to help us see more of the world, to engage with a greater spectrum of language, But if we just shorten it down, fewer words, we can't say dead anymore, so it's just alive with an un in front of it. We cut away language, we whittle it down to just this subset of small, happy, safe words. We're doing such a great disservice to ourselves, to our mental health. That's something that needs to stop. We need to start using words the way they're meant to be used. That is to convey meaning. And that is my challenge to everyone. Please use your words to convey meaning. Choose not to soften the blow of words that have powerful meanings. Choose not to shy away from feeling your emotions, from choosing the word that displays the emotion. I would like to see the word unalive scrubbed. TikTok is the worst about that one, and I know it's partially to do with younger generations, but I would like to see that word no longer used, especially in the context of the events in the world today where people are dying and we need to be able to emotionally engage with that fact, because otherwise progress cannot happen. If we are backstepping language, we cannot step forward with progress. That is all for me today. I will talk to you again very soon. Good luck to you. Good luck to all of us. Bye.